whole ethos of the pitch is, hey, here's what people are looking for already. This is just expanding on it, or this is just another point of view. And when you boil it down, what PR is just sending a relevant pitch and sending it to the right person. And if you can put the two and two together, you create a seamless system in your business where you can be connecting the dots and getting all sorts of media opportunities. It all starts with those two things, which is...
Let's double click in on that, because I would love to hear you get into what are the tools.
Yeah. So
Gloria Chou is an award-winning PR strategist and the host of the top-rated small business PR podcast.
Went from serving as a U.S. diplomat to revolutionizing PR for BIPOC.
And female entrepreneurs, helping them land features in places like the New York Times, Forbes, Vogue.
Without any connections or massive followings, and she's proven that visibility isn't just about business growth.
You dive extremely deep, and you are so unapologetic in talking about your own background. How did that come into the picture?
You know, it's very interesting, kind of like the whole diverse community, right? I never set out to be like, I'm only going to market to BIPOC, but it's kind of like when your business and life, for me, there's really no separation. Like who I am in real life is how I serve and show up in business. And so I realized, like, yes, it is about the tools and resources, but it's also about creating a super safe space where people who have literally never felt comfortable feeling seen can say, I'm going to pitch for myself today. I'm going to go after that opportunity. It's just about creating a space to welcome all of those lived experiences. And through that, as a community, we're doing this work together. And that's why I call this work really sacred work, because rewriting so many of the narratives that have been passed down to us from our parents, from our culture, and what have you.
Hey, and welcome back to Big Asian Energy. Now, we talk a lot about things like visibility on the show, but it's really hard to actually define what does it mean to be visible. And oftentimes, especially when I talk to business owners and entrepreneurs, there's a lot of questions like, well, how do I get out there and get seen more by others? Is it marketing? Do I need to just talk to myself more? Do I just need to get ChatGPT to do all these things? But the question is, what if the key to building your business wasn't just about marketing tactics, but about healing generational trauma? This is probably a wild idea. And today's guest went from serving as a US diplomat to revolutionizing PR for BIPOC and female entrepreneurs, helping them land features in places like the New York Times, Forbes, Vogue, without any connections or massive followings. And she's proven that visibility isn't just about business growth. It actually is about diving deeper in ourselves. If you're new here, welcome to Big Asian Energy. I'm your friend, John Wang, and on the show, we interview Asian American changemakers, ceiling breakers, and a few troublemakers to learn their secrets. And as always, if there's something on this episode that resonates, send it to someone you care about who might benefit from it, because when we rise together. Today, we're talking to Gloria Chou, who is an award-winning PR strategist and the host of the top-rated small business PR podcast. Known for her traditional yet proven approaches to PR, which makes visibility and access to media accessible for anyone, Gloria helps BIPOC and female founders get featured organically in top-tier media without needing PR connections or a large following. Her strategies have earned small businesses in nearly every industry niche and over 1 billion organic views, and features an outlet like New York Times, Oprah's Favorite Things, Vogue, Forbes, without having any pay to play. She was named as one of the pitch writing experts of the year in 2021 as part of the influential Businesswoman Awards, and is a Forbes Next 1000 honoree. Thanks for being on the show, Gloria.
Wow, what an intro. I love that. And I love troublemakers and rule breakers. It's right up my alley.
Oh yeah, we're here for the troublemakers, because we get enough like overly polished, really perfect Asians as it is out there, and we really believe that really if we're going to break the ceilings and within ourselves and within any society we're a part of, we need people who are willing to break the rules. And I feel like you are definitely somebody who falls into all of those categories.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, as a 5 foot tall daughter of a widowed immigrant, I don't really see myself reflected in media. And here I am telling other people to say, hey, go pitch yourself. So it definitely is a radical act. I'm not your typical PR gal, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I can totally imagine. But I want to dive into that a little bit more because I think a lot of people have heard the term PR, but they may not be aware. Like, I'll be honest, until I started going into my book and getting to publishing, I have never really understood what PR even is. So, can you just start us off there? As a small business owner, who needs PR and what the heck even does it mean?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said about that because it's so kind of muddy, right? We have so many of those pay to play, get seen ins. Raise your hand if you've gotten those DMs that's like, I'll get you featured in some random 40 under 40, or pay $10,000 to be on a show with a C-list celebrity that's going to air, at 4 a.m. in some small town. So that's not what I mean by PR. I always say marketing is you talking about you, and PR is your industry talking about you. And at the time of recording, as we all know, it's all about SEO search and also AI search. So how do you get found in those
Hmm.
places? How do you do something where you do something once and it keeps working for you? For me, PR is one of those really high leverage activities because an ad goes away. You have to keep feeding the Mark Zuckerberg machine. The reels, I think I'm reading the algorithm shows your stuff to now 10% or 15% of people, and the buying intent's very low. But if you're
Hmm.
clicking on an article that has something to do with your story, your product, your niche, the buying intent of that person is probably much higher. So I always think about how can I work smarter and not harder. And PR really is one of the best things that you can do. But the reason why people don't do it is because it's been gate kept. It's been gate kept by these madman esque agencies that want you to pay anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 per month every month for up to 6 months. They loop you into these big contracts and they say, well, the media access is hidden behind me. You have to go through me. And my
Hmm.
whole thing is saying F you to all of the establishment and the status quo. And I say, we don't need you to gatekeep anything. We have our own story. We just need access to be able to tell that. And so that's really what I have done. I've kind of disrupted the PR industry in a way where a small business owner, a seller on Etsy, or a solo founder like you can get access to the media because I think this whole thing hinges upon this myth, this lie that we've been told that
Hmm.
somehow journalists want to talk to a PR rep or a publicist. And that's simply not true. They want to talk to you, the founder. So why are we putting a middleman like in the middle of this, right? Let's just get to them directly. You know what to say. You have all the nuggets, the stories, the wisdom. And so it's just about feeling empowered to actually go out there.
Oh, I love that. Man, you could tell you're working with a PR professional when she could so succinctly get to the root of things so beautifully. And I love that you specifically work with BIPOC business owners. And I'm really
Mhm.
curious, at what point did that come up for you? Because
Yeah.
I've always felt like this is something that's been underserved, but I'm curious about your journey.
It's funny. When I first started doing this kind of online business model during COVID, when
Yeah.
everyone did, I call it the gold rush of the pandemic online business, right? Um, I didn't know. I didn't really think that I was attracting or that that was going to be my niche. But
Mhm.
as I built my audience, as I shared my story, and I have a quite an untraditional story. I never grew up with a mom and a dad.
Actually,
Mhm.
just pause there for a second because I want to dive more into this before you answer that question. Can
Yeah.
you share a little bit about your story? Because you're right, your story is completely untraditional. What was
Yeah.
your background like?
So, and to loop it back is like people ask me, right? Like, how do you have such a diverse audience? And it's not really like I woke up one day and was like, this is going to be the BIPOC PR group. Like, this was not at all my marketing, but I realized that I had over 80% people of color, first generation immigrants, people whose English is not their first or second language. And I was asked about this very question on a podcast of like, is that what you set out to do? Was that like part of your angle? And I was like, it wasn't. But then when I look back on my journey,
Mm.
everything is about being proximate to different lived experiences because I really think that you don't attract diversity, you are diversity. And so from the content you consume, from the cultures that you get proximate to, from the curiosity that you have, from the way that you elevate people with different lived experiences, it could be a conscious or unconscious choice. But coming back to kind of how I became that way is my father died when I was 3. I kind of lived biculturally through, living with aunts and uncles and grandparents. And I moved like 13 times as a kid, lived in Beijing, lived in all over US. And during high school, I lived with my best friend's family. So they kind of took me in and adopted me to finish high school. And they're a black family. And
Mm.
so a single mom with four black children, 4 black women, and just learning what it was like to be a black woman with 4 Black daughters in America in a predominantly white neighborhood. It was South Orange County at that time. Just really opened up my eyes to all these different intersectionalities. Because, even though I was a person of color, my experience was a little bit different than her experience, right? As a Black woman growing up in the projects of DC, I was a first generation immigrant. So I just think being at the intersection of all of these different cultures has really taught me so much about, the fact that you will always stay in your bubble unless you have that curiosity to get curious. And I just found myself to be very curious. For example, one of the projects I did in middle school about world religions, like I deep dove into Islam, right? That's not really like the most popular choice, but I was like, I want to do that. And then in college, when I studied abroad, I didn't go to Paris or France or London. I went to South Africa because I wanted to go to a place that was somewhere that was far away that I wasn't going to get a chance to do. So I guess innately built in and also circumstantially, I've always been very proximate to different lived experiences. And because of that, maybe people can tell, and somehow in my message, it resonates with them. And people of diverse backgrounds naturally just come to me. But it definitely was not something that I started to do of like, oh, this is what I'm going to do, or this was my niche.
I love that. And I understand you used to be a US diplomat, and that was not usually what it is I would guess somebody who goes into PR. How did that path end up making a connection?
Yeah, no, my life is just kind of an identity crisis, right? I always say identity crisis, and I'm on my third career. So I loved international relations because I grew up bilingual and bicultural, and I studied abroad in South Africa. I studied a lot of international relations. I got my undergrad in international relations, and I applied for a bunch of grad schools, and I got a scholarship for grad school because I wasn't able to pay for it. And one of the scholarships I got was from the U.S. State Department, and so they kind of pre-selected me to be a U.S. diplomat, or what you call in the foreign service. And, in return, they would pay for my grad school. And then I would be basically like pre-selected, and I was kind of, committed to that path. And that was a really great career if that's what you're into. It has a lot of amazing, benefits and pensions, but I just realized that I'm not a bureaucrat. I'm just really not. And I'm really meant to be an entrepreneur. And I think I just found out too late in life. And then, COVID happened and I kind of gave up. I'll never forget this. I submitted my resignation 2 days before Trump got elected the first term. I just had a bad feeling about things. And so I turned in my diplomatic passport, kind of moved home, had a midlife crisis, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. I always knew I loved to see people win. Like I was always that unofficial hype woman that was like connecting people to opportunities and kind of empowering people. And I always joke that in my previous life, I was a hip hop MC, like getting everyone in the crowd like excited, like just everyone's natural hype girl. And I applied for, like over 1,000 jobs on LinkedIn while I was still active, like as a US diplomat, because I wanted to make the transition into PR. Because at that point I've written a lot of communications for the ambassador. I was very strong in that field, and I couldn't get a single one because they all wanted very specific agency experience. And that's when I realized, like, wow, this industry is really traditional and it is right for a disruption. And from literally getting like tiny little clients who I didn't know what their industry was. Again, I didn't have any journalist contacts, so I didn't have a book of contacts to call up. I had to literally Google in the search bar, New York Times newsroom, and I started dialing the operator with shaking, sweaty palms. And I just think from being like a really thick-skinned person, that's like my husband calls me shameless, and just like cold pitching, like from the operator all the way up to the intern, to the producer, like, and getting my clients onto like CNBC and like New York Times. I just picked up on patterns of what worked. And now I teach that to founders all around the world. And I actually think that my biggest kind of disadvantage became my biggest advantage because I was totally an outsider.
Oh, I love that. The biggest disadvantages that you may think you have ends up being essentially your superpower. This is what it is that makes you so unique. So let's dive into it. You help small business owners get seen in, without having to pay all these massive amounts of things. When I was going through publishing, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and attest. I talked to probably a bunch of different people from PR. Every single one of them were quoting insanely high rates. And I truly believed like that was the only path to get published onto these major things. Now, fortunately, my publisher had a super amazing PR person. And so I got to, utilize that. But for most average individuals, mom and pops, what is your framework? How do you help them to kind of get to on those massive, Wall Street journals or media outlets without having to pay that amount?
Yeah. Everything rests on the belief that you have to believe that the agencies don't want you to believe, but the belief that journalists want to hear fresh, diverse voices from people from all walks of life. And if you
Hmm.
believe that, then you know that you are working symbiotically with the media and that we depend on the media for discovery of new voices, of new things, of new products. So if you believe that, then all of a sudden it takes the pressure off because you're like, oh, I don't need to hire a publicist or need to be at a certain level of business because you absolutely don't need to. They don't care about your Instagram following. You can just buy your Instagram followers, right? And it's not about how groundbreaking or earth shattering your thing is. It's just about positioning it in a right way for that season. So out of all the times that I pitched, I realized that it's really about leading with the relevance and having something very specific. And a lot of times we want to just shove our entire autobiography or menu of services to a journalist, but you're not selling to the journalist. They're not going to buy from you. So it's just about taking a step back and kind of like writing the coattails of what's happening right now, whether it's a seasonal story, whether it's a story about sustainability, whether if you make a product, it could be something for Q4 holidays or Father's Day. It could be about something that's data backed. So now with so many AI tools, my favorite is Perplexity, you can research the trends in your industry, simply use one of those trends and then pitch that to a journalist. So you're never kind of starting from scratch. That's really
Hmm.
kind of the overall method is you're not begging, you're just working symbiotically with the journalist, right? They need to publish content 24/7. And when you boil it down, what PR is just sending a relevant pitch and sending it to the right person. And if you can put the two and two together, you create a seamless system in your business where you can be connecting the dots and getting all sorts of media opportunities, whether that's TV or that's radio. It all starts with those two things, which is having a relevant pitch. Notice how I said relevant, not newsworthy. I don't believe that there's inherently something that's more newsworthy than that. I've written pitches for, AI, stem cell, pharma techs, brain surgeons, and then also for toilet paper, and they get they get featured. So it's not about newsworthiness. And if you think about, you know, even water is being reinvented, right? So there's like like liquid death, right? So
Oh
don't
yeah.
think that you have to do something brand new, and then just
Hmm.
sending it to the right person. And now with all these tools, which I can get into, you can kind of create a workflow that's very simple with AI where you are constantly finding new journalists and using AI to brainstorm what is the relevant topic to pitch.
Let's double click in on that because I would love to hear you get into what are the tools.
Yeah. So we can talk about, well, first let's talk about sending the relevant pitch, right? So from all the times that I've pitched, throwing spaghetti on the wall, like having no context, I started to pick up on patterns of when journalists would say, okay, well, tell me more. And it boils down to my CPR pitching framework. So C stands for credibility, P stands for point of view, R stands for relevance. And when you want to pitch, you want to have those three things. And I usually start the pitch off with relevance because what is news if it's not relevant? So instead of saying, hi, how are you? How's the weather? All the stuff that's going to make them kind of delete your email, you want to go straight to what is the relevant thing. So if you make a product, it could be, hey, as people are looking for stocking stuffers for Q4, or if it's summertime, it could be summertime, recipes or whatever that is. If you're a business owner or if you don't make a physical product, it could be something about a survey that you read that was interesting. Right now, AI is all the rage. So you can tie it to some relevant points. And after that relevance, then you give 3 bullet points, which is the point of view. So it could be 3 tips. It could be 3 solutions that you found. It could be 3 insights. Don't hide it. So I'll give you an example. We had someone who was a speaking coach for introverts, and her pitch was using a third-party data that she's found on the internet that actually said that certain introverts are better suited for C-level positions than extroverts, which is kind of contrarian, right? And so she started her email with, hey, this study found that, introverts are better suited for these C-level positions. Here are 3 tips to help introverts stand out in the boardroom. So it kind of reads like almost like an article in a way. And then you conclude with the C, which is credibility. And so a little bit about you and your story. Don't go crazy here. You can add hyperlinks to your about page, but this is not like a huge block of text, right? And there you have it. That's kind of a value-driven conversation that gets someone interested and to say, okay, well, tell me more. The whole ethos of the pitch is, hey, here's what people are looking for already. This is just expanding on it, or this is just another point of view.
Hmm. I love that. So let's take this, and I want to take a little bit deeper because one thing that I really loved when we got to connect was the fact that you actually aren't like most, I would say, PR people, in that most PR people kind of stay to the surface. you dive extremely deep and you are so unapologetic in talking about your own background. And I just want to kind of explore that a little bit because you talk about things like familial trauma and your upbringing and all these kind of things. How did that come into the picture?
Yeah, it's very interesting, kind of like the whole diverse community, right? I never set out to be like, I'm
Yeah.
only going to market to BIPOC, but it's kind of like when your business in life, for me, there's really no separation. Like who I am in real life is how I serve and show up in business. And I realize that I can give you all the tools, all the contacts, but if you don't feel safe advocating for yourself, or if it culturally is looked down upon to promote yourself, which hello, like Chinese American,
Yeah,
um,
we're going to dive in on that in a second.
you're not gonna promote your business. And so I realized, like, yes, it is about the tools and resources, but it's also about creating a super safe space where people who have literally never felt comfortable feeling seen can say, I'm going to pitch for myself today. I'm going to go after that opportunity and not wait my turn or wait until it's super polished. And that's something that a lot of people, especially people living on the margins, people who are not a part of the mainstream dialogue, that's something that we struggle with, whether it's cultural, intergenerational. And so to me, this is really the deeper work. And I don't really see a lot of PR people approaching it that way. A lot of PR is about publicity and glitz and glam and getting those logos. And while those are all great, no amount of, SEO is going to help you feel safe to advocate for yourself if you don't see yourself in other community with other people doing the same thing. So we have people who are neurodivergent, we have people who are differently abled, we have people who's, again, English is not their first or second language, we have people who are starting their businesses a lot older and they don't feel like they're like the skinny pretty wellness person because maybe they're in their 70s. So it's just about creating a space to welcome all of those lived experiences, and through that, as a community, we're doing this work together. And that's why I call this work really sacred work, because we are rewriting so many of the narratives that have been passed down to us from our parents, from our culture, and what have you.
Hmm. What was your own experience with this like? Because I mean, I'm guessing it wasn't like something that you just decided to come across and start talking about it. This feels so personal. And I feel like you embody that, not just talk about it, but this is a journey that it feels like you've kind of gone through and explored a lot of deep work around yourself.
Yeah, I started to look around at like who gets the most airtime. And a lot of the times, the loudest, like, bros in the room, um, aren't the people that I necessarily resonate with or create safety for other people.
Yeah,
And
this is
that's
a safe space. We could call that out. What it is.
yeah.
It's not wrong.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
we're at this pivotal juncture after COVID, after AI,
Oh
after like
yeah.
everyone just not needing another course anymore, where information is no longer a scarce commodity. We're starting to wake up to those pressure tactics of toxic bro marketing,
Hmm.
and realizing like that's not necessarily what I want to do, right? So, for example, we have people who are in the DMs all the time. I get them from, I think they look like 23. They can't be older than 21, and they're like, "Oh, I'll teach you how to print money so you can sit back and relax, building a high ticket sales funnel." And it's like, what makes you think that that's how I want to define richness in my life? And I think as I've
Mm.
suffered burnout, because I did follow all of the bro marketing templates of more is always better and 10x this and do that, and um, I realized that didn't lead me to happiness, because it also didn't attract the right people too, right? Your message is who you attract, you are your vibe. And
Hmm.
I realized that chasing KPIs on an Excel spreadsheet of where you have to double or increase your revenue every year led me to a complete and utter burnout. So I had a huge fibroid tumor that grew in my uterus, 13 centimeters, like size of a baby's
Oof.
head. And I think it's because of my scarcity of like pushing and pushing and being so disconnected to my own sense of what I wanted to create or what richness feels like. And so I was chasing those numbers. I wanted to have a 6-figure launch, finally pulled it off. And then I went into a complete mental breakdown. Like I was not happy. I was a terrible leader. I was berating my team about the people who wanted refunds. And I just didn't like the person I was becoming, because it was
Mm.
so focused on external measures of success. I was on date night with my husband. And while he was talking to me, I was scrolling through the DMs, chatting with, a lead trying to close a sale. And he looked at me, he's like, is this really worth it? Like, this is the one date night that I carved out for us, and you can't even like eat your meal with me, right? So I just realized, like, what is it worth and what is it for? But I understand where it comes from, right? Because my husband, being an Italian, and he's not a Jersey Italian, he's like Italian Italian. Like, I met him, he had a visa. His parents were not wealthy, but they didn't have proximity to war and famine and labor camps in communist China like the way that my mom did. And so I realized that the work was on me to unravel that, because it's so proximate in this generation. Like my grandmother, sister, mother had bound feet, like during that time. And my mom's brothers, my uncles, went to labor camps, and they were never mentally the same. I'm the only person out of my entire family, out of all my cousins, to come to the US. And so being so close to generational famine, where you literally didn't have enough to eat, you were given food rations, um, puts you at a different level on the spectrum of feeling safety and security than maybe my husband does, right? And I didn't really realize that until I started to build my business. And I realized, well, why couldn't I delegate? Why is it that I wasn't able to spend money on anything? Why was I hoarding cash? Why was I, not being able to expand my business and let money flow? It was because of that. And if you study the chakras, and I don't think it's woo, I think it's absolutely true. The sacral chakra, where the fibroid was, my uterus, represents money. And so having that literal block of cells that I saw, just a mass, when I saw that taken out of me, I finally understood that that was what stuck energy looked like. That was the generational stuff that my grandma passed on to my mom, that I am working very hard in this lifetime to take out. So after that happened, after working through that, I had a C-section. So it was like open abdominal surgery. I was wearing bandages, delivering webinars with staples and bandages. I started to reflect on, like, why is it that I'm so mentally burnt out? Why is it that I've reached all of my quote unquote business metrics, but I was so unhappy? And it was because of that. It was because I was fed this marketing template of more is always better, and everything is measured on an Excel spreadsheet. And if you do the work of really thinking about it, what in the natural world grows year after year after year? Viruses and cancer, that's it. Nothing else grows without seasonality. And so I started to do a lot of healing. Psychedelics was a huge part of that. Healing my own inner trauma with money, my own safety with money, because there wasn't a number, that I could have made to make me feel safe, because it just wasn't mathing, right? Like I did a 6-figure launch, but I still felt more insecure than ever. So it was really about the nervous system work that we had to do to create a sense of enoughness in the here and now that I never felt in my life, and then rebuilding a business from that. And I think now my message, if you look at my message and sales page, it's so much different and radically different than what it used to be. And that's really kind of the journey that I'm on.
I think that's such an important part of it. I mean, we when we approach business, it's not something that we usually think about. We usually see it as separate things, right? Like, oh, business is business, the personal is personal. So we tend to take on all of the same stuff, and we kind of go, oh, I'll fix it once my business is successful, and then I'll go and have time, and I can go and like work on myself and like go through the healing. But I think what you're really bringing up here that I feel like more people needs to be aware of is, chances are pretty good that how you show up in your business, how you show up at work, even if you're not an entrepreneur, like the way that you show up at work, because PR is really self-advocacy, and visibility is not just for entrepreneurs, it's everything that you do. And if you are not showing up in the authenticity of who you are, everything is going to always feel like this upwards push, right? It's almost like you're rolling this thing up up this boulder up the hill. And in my own journey, that's what I've really kind of discovered as well. Like my kind of dark night of the soul happened also the same thing. Like I burnt out, crashed, got super sick. And like literally like everything around me felt like it was just all falling apart. And that was when supposedly my resume looked, the shiniest. But that desire and that pressure to constantly present as this polished, perfect version was actually what was keeping me back. It was actually not what allows me to kind of go into that next stage or next step, because I was keeping myself confined and I was so tense, constantly trying to stay safe. And I didn't realize that. And when we think about the ideas of PR and visibility, again, we think of it as, oh, like I would love to be on, the cover of magazines. I would love to be mentioned by this, major publishing house or whatever it is. But we don't really realize that before we can get there and let ourselves be seen, we have to first be okay with letting ourselves be seen by us, by ourselves.
Yeah.
And if there's that disconnection when we're thinking about our own story, I think it leaks into everything that we create, and it leaks into our messaging. It leaks into how we, introduce ourselves to business partners, to networks, to our own clients. We can sense when someone is disconnected at their core.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there are people who like publicity just so that they could get the accolades and do that. But like the Sufi poet Rumi says, you are what you seek. So there is a type of marketing where you attract people who are looking for just more is always better. But I'm finding that the more I lean to the spaciousness of what I want to create, and I have a word for every year. And this year, my word is freedom. And it just means letting go of all the shoulds of what we've been told of how you should run an event, how you should do a group coaching program, all the shoulds. And the more that I let go of that, the more my people were able to come find me. And, I'll never forget when Trump got elected and inaugurated, the day of MLK Day, I wrote an email and I wrote about race. I wrote about what it meant to me. And I wrote about what my views are. And I got 100 unsubscribes. I had people unsubscribing. But then after a month or two, like it just kind of shot up and my people came to find me. And so I just think that with what's happening in the world, neutrality is really not an option. And if you are still neutral in your business, then check your privilege.
Oof.
Boom. Because yeah, exactly. So I know that like for my people and the people that I serve, like there are real implications here of what's going on. And so I always say like, this is a year where we cannot do business as usual. And I created a whole retreat based on that. And so the right people who understood that came along, and the people who did not agree, then they can exit through the door. And I actually welcome that. And the pinnacle of this messaging work, which again takes a lot of courage, bravery, and to really show up, is when I was referred by someone to be on a podcast. And she put me on a thread with her friend and was like, hey, Chef Gloria on a podcast. She's really amazing. She was a great guest. And then this person messaged me back and said, I appreciate your email, but I will not be pursuing further collaboration. It's true that our values do not align. And, from looking at your socials. And the old Gloria would have been like, what? Like super like, oh my God, I got rejected. But I'll never forget. I was brushing my teeth. I had foam coming down my mouth. And I was like, holy shit, I've reached the pinnacle of messaging. Because when your message is so clear that the wrong person automatically just, unsubscribes, like, isn't that what the pinnacle of messaging is to like show our values so boldly? So that was a really proud full circle moment for me was when I got rejected from that podcast.
Hells yeah, I love that. Hey, I just wanted to let you know that Big Asian Energy is officially out, and you can go and pick it up anywhere you buy books, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, etc. If you've ever felt like there's something stopping you from reaching your full potential, if you've ever felt like you want to have that unstoppable charisma and confidence in the work that you do, as well as just the way you show up in life, this might be the book for you. It is a book that is jam-packed with research studies, advice, case studies, stories, and of course, so many different techniques and takeaways, including communication, as well as mindset, as well as confidence, and all the other topics out there. It just won one of the best books of 2025 on Amazon. So if you haven't checked it out yet, go take a look. And finally, if you have a few seconds, can I also ask you to leave a quick review for Big Asian Energy? It not only means the world to us to hear from you, but more importantly, it does absolutely help us in reaching more audiences. I hope you're having an amazing day, and thanks again. I love this metaphor. I heard it one time from a teacher of mine, and he describes it as a magnet, which is that if you want to be the strongest possible magnet, you have to remember that on one side of the magnet, it will attract, and on the other, it will repel. And that's okay. In fact, I think the biggest problem we have in this day and age, especially with like the rise of, and I would say people using AI in a wrong way, because they just kind of like go in and being like, create some content for me, and without really thinking about it, is that people end up settling in this like beige zone, right? Like, like this, like, I don't really stand for anything. And when what you can create, when your messaging and who you are is something that any other person in your field can come on, and you can't tell the difference between what you do and what other people do, then you're not really saying anything. It's like this saying, it's like you're saying nothing and you're saying it badly.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's why I recently recorded a podcast episode as well on my podcast, Small Business PR. And it was about the year of being unapologetic in my messaging. And I realized that the more I talked about, uncomfortable things, I talked about steaming my vagina in Mexico for like one Sunday. And that was literally the title of it. And the right people were like, "Oh my God, like this is ancestral stuff, like totally like." And the people who don't, they'll just unsubscribe. And I've had people tell me all the time, but I feel like that leap to go from like just like neutral and kind of like watered down to your most boldest, most authentic self, that's probably the most sacred work you will do in this lifetime. And when you can do that, and and it doesn't mean that you need to offend people, but just being unapologetically you then create such a space and invitation for other people to do the same.
That's it, right? Like we think that it's all about finding more and more and more people, but it's really finding more of your people. And, that could show up in our own storytelling, that could show up in the work that we do.
Yeah, you don't need a billion people to have a profitable business. You just need like 100 great customers who will keep following you and buying from you and really believe in you. And that's really all you need.
Like it's such a paradigm shift when we realize that at the end of the day, like, what are you doing this for? Are you doing this for vanity numbers? Because if you're just doing it for vanity numbers, you can go and buy those followers today. But if you're really trying to make an impact and make the sales and make money off of that, it's actually better to really step into your authenticity.
Yeah, I
So I
really don't
want to,
want to go. I want to go deeper. I don't want to go wider. And so there's, someone right now, right, who is doing a
yeah,
crazy book launch, trying to shatter all these records, book
yeah.
records, and
Mhm.
make $100 million in a day. That's a different type of business model than what I'm trying to do. I find that there's so much richness when I really get to know my community, their stories, than just trying to be like to sell to as many people as possible.
And I think this is a great time to put in a plug for your podcast because it's one of the top podcasts. And as I've been going through the episodes and taking a look through, like there's so much richness, and it really shows that you are actually present in it. Like I'm not just kind of going through and randomly looking at generically created topics. Like you exist. And at the end of the day, all content we create really comes down to two things, which is just like, what is it that you're experiencing and what is it that your point of view is? So the more that we amplify that, really the better it is, not just for yourself but for everyone else around you.
Boom. I'll say something else as well, about that. I think a lot of times the word values gets thrown around a lot, right? It's like, yeah, I stand for everything. And I really found through my journey that your values don't mean anything unless I know what you're loudly and unapologetically rejecting.
Hmm.
And I want to know your values through what you're rejecting more than what you're for. Because so many people can say, I'm for this and that. But are you really saying no to certain things? And that's really, I think, the hallmark of someone that's really true in their values.
I want to hear a little bit more about that, because I think that is a tough thing to actually sit in. I mean, it's easy to
Mm.
kind of like conceptualize, but the truth is it's kind of scary out there, right? Like there are loud and very aggressive people that we face on the internet on a day-to-day basis. How do you come to find that safety within yourself when you talk about the things that you reject?
Well, I also think that your business will only rise to the level of problems that you can solve. And if you are not willing to get a couple haters or getting people unfollow you, then maybe you're not ready to really take a stance and make the impact that you're here to make. So for me, the upside of making someone feel truly seen, of like, I get email responses now. I had a CMO writing all me emails. I couldn't grow anything. Now I write my own emails. I get 25 responses of people being like, this was what I needed to hear. Thank you so much. I'm so glad someone said this. Yeah. And occasionally I get people telling me to shut up and stay in my lane. That's fine too. But the upside of making someone feel truly seen with my content is so much like more important to me than like the 2 or 3 haters. And so I just have to focus my time and attention on how I'm serving and how I'm showing up. And all the rest of the stuff is just residual. It's just a part of it. And that's totally fine. I'll take that any day if it means that I can truly make someone feel seen.
Hmm. I love that. You have so much wisdom in what it is that you share in your workshops, in the work and the seminars and webinars that you lead, as well as in your own content. I'm curious if you could go back in time to talk to yourself from, little Gloria, from when she was like just starting off, maybe 20, 25. What would you tell her?
Ooh. That the world needs you to be more you and stop asking for permission all the time. I think because I didn't grow up with like a mom and a dad, like I wasn't very grounded, and I always just was kind of floating from one place to another. And I had all these friends, but I was always very kind of a people pleaser, and just seeking approval from anyone and everything for every little decision that I made. And I think the more that I built my business and the more that I realized it absolutely works and that what's meant for you will always come to you, then you create this openness of like, okay, well, what is it that I finally want to do? And that's why I'm not in a business mastermind this year. I feel like we don't need more business strategies. Now with AI, it does it all for you. All the strategies work, right? We don't need another tool. Like, it's not about the tool. It's like, what do you feel like for right now in the season of your business? What is it that you want to do? Could I have a 7, 8 figure business where I'm making multiple 7 figures every year? Sure. Do I want to do that? I don't. I'm very happy at the level of business I'm at with a lot of profitability and a very lean team. And then I get to travel for 3 months out of the year. That to me, there's so much more richness in that than scaling to 7 figures and having like a bunch of headaches with team and overhead. So that's really the freedom that we need to create once we stop following what everybody else wants to do and really check in with it. What is it that you want to build and what kind of business model you want to build, how you want to show up, and then make decisions through that lens.
I love that. Recently, we had a guest on, Vicky Tai, who's the founder of Tatcha, and she talks about this. And she says that at this season in her life, she says that she is re-indexing for joy. In other words, she used to index her progress based on how much success she has, and and especially given the size of the business she built. But she's like, now I'm just indexing for joy, and it's really
Yeah.
shaped my mind. And I love that right now. What you mentioned is freedom, and there's another layer that we can now explore from it. Is how can we just be more us? How can we just feel more joy? How can we just create more freedom? And really, doesn't that more isn't that more important than all the other things? Because isn't the point of making more money to try to bring in more joy and to give us
Yeah.
more freedom, right? It's such an irony that we say these things, but yet we're still often focused on the wrong thing.
Yeah. I think for Asian Americans, especially if you look at the history of migration, of how we have been a part of society, it's really not one of being ourselves. It's one of assimilating to someone else's culture. It's one of
Mm-hmm.
making other people feel comfortable. It's one of always kind of being on the margins of not trying to take up too much space and just kind of being there. And I think this really is bleeding into so many of the reasons why we see, like for example, Asian Americans have the highest suicide rate, right? And I think it's because this kind of displacement of identities of like, we're not quite sure what we are. We're trying to model this type of success, but then who are we really? And I think there's a lot to unpack there that we can't obviously do in this episode, but there's something unique about the Asian American experience specifically in
Mm-hmm.
America and in Canada, although I think Canada has done a much better job with integration. That really ties with the theme of what you're saying, which is why is it so hard for us to just do whatever it is that we want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you shared that. It is true. We kind of exist in two spaces sometimes, and we don't really feel like we fully belong in either. And it's not just about race. I think a lot of people go, oh, it's a race thing, but it's not about race. I think there's culture, there's background, and there's so many more layers to it. And really, where it comes down to is essentially, where do we find ourselves truly feel like we belong? And belonging isn't just about acceptance. Belonging really is, do we feel like we could be seen for who we actually are, not just the persona that we put out there, not just for the identity, not just for many of us, we're really good chameleons, right? Like we could belong in
Mhm.
any place because we just know how to mimic and act. Like I could do the bro talk thing so well, that, and I've done it for so long that like that was who I just thought that I was, until I realized that it's actually just a learned pattern and another learned voice rather than who I actually am and what it is I actually stand for. It's tough, it is tough to acknowledge, but sometimes the first step is just kind of sitting in it.
And also, I think the generational stuff too, where
Yeah.
there's so much of a difference between our experience than our parents, that displacement across generations, across cultures, it also puts a lot of work on us as well. And so there is this dynamic between us and our parents because it's just, Asia is so different than the Western world. But we
Mm-hmm.
are born here, we are American, but then our parents have a point of view that's so different across vast geographies. And so kind of closing that gap is also really difficult and painful for a lot of people. And that's why a lot of people have a I want to say strained relationship with your parents, right? It doesn't come easy. I definitely have my share of that too. So I think for all those reasons, And I think a lot of people don't realize that the Asian American experience is really quite unique in that way.
Yeah, it's a strange thing to talk about because it's not really mirrored by any particular narrative. Like we kind of exist in the in-between of like this like third culture identity and third culture story. There's just so many different layers and it's hard to talk about because there's also no unifying identity. Like what
Mm-hmm.
even is Asian American? Are we talking East Asians, South Asians, all
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Now we could go, we talk about all this kind of stuff all the time on the shows. We don't have to dive super deep into it. I'm curious to hear, especially for, because you work with, I think, women and especially BIPOC women as one of your biggest demographics, right? How do you see these things we're talking about and these cultural experiences, family experiences kind of show up in the work that they do when you're really working with them?
Yeah. One of the things is just no time, or like somehow working on your business is indulgent, right? Because it's all about, we see our mothers being martyrs, and we see, a lot of the people in our family just sacrificing themselves. And that's a form of love, is how can you sacrifice and how can you put your needs last as a way to show love? And a lot of what entrepreneurship is really prioritizing yourself and what you need to do and making decisions as an individual and not as a collective. So I think so many of the things in Asian culture is actually kind of quite opposite of what you need to succeed in modern entrepreneurship. And it's not to say that we can't be good entrepreneurs. It just means that we don't have the support system or that normalization, even the lexicon to talk about it. I'll never forget, my mom's like, even up until a few years ago, she's like, oh, when are you going to get a real job? Like this is not a real job. Or like, or she'll be like, oh yeah, she's a coach. Like she likes to do charity or something like that. Like it didn't really understand that
Yeah.
you could create a business and a community while still having revenue, right? She thought this was kind of a community meant like fun and part-time. And it's like, no, well, people are actually looking for guidance. So I just think there's so many disconnects with our parents' generation and what they thought about what is a profitable business model and like how we can show up. So I think that's also really interesting too. And as I built my business, I realized that, people are busy. They're trying to take care of parents. They're trying to take care of kids. How can I create the shortest path that saves them time, but also empowers them to be like, I can actually do this. And so that's from a content point of view, like just giving them access and not drowning them in content, right? It's creating a simple flow for them to quickly come in and get what they need. It's creating unlimited access to me and not having them wait their turn on a Zoom call. We have a lot of coaches who are just, they have a lot of coaches in their program. And one of the things I'm really proud of is I don't have other coaches in my program. I have guest experts who are journalists, but I'm not selling the program and then you come in and you're talking to my coaches. Like you're talking directly to me. And, maybe that's not the most sustainable business model, but I really love the fact that people are getting what they perceive to be getting. And because a lot of times they are really burnt out by a lot of the promises from online coaches who, first of all, have no lived experience that are similar to them, who have no idea of what it's like to, send money back home, right? Because they kind of just lived in a way that's like college was paid for and all those other things. So I think from me sharing my story and then highlighting other members in our community who are doing amazing things, it just creates this openness and permission to be like, oh, okay, I'm not alone in this, or I feel like I belong. And so going back to what you're saying is creating that belonging is just so important. That's why I think my business is really community based, because it is about true belonging.
I love that. This is already sounding incredible for people who are listening, who want to find out more about being part of that community and learning from you and getting to do their own PR instead of having to pay some agency tens and tens of thousands of dollars to do it. How do they go about finding you?
So I'm on Instagram. I share a lot about my healing with my mom and my journey with psychedelic assisted therapy. And I'm at Gloria Chou PR. That's Gloria Chou PR. And then you can watch a free masterclass, because I really believe in helping as many people for free as possible. The abundance will come back. You will watch this masterclass and you can actually get featured just hearing what I have to say. So go to gloriachoupr.com/masterclass. I'll walk you through a screenshot of a couple of pitches word for word. I got someone featured. And just let me know what you think. So I'm an open book. Oh, and if you DM me the word Asian on Instagram, I will give you another resource that will help you kind of get the ball rolling. I'll show you a new AI workflow that I've been using that's absolutely game changing for PR.
Incidentally, I'm just going to say right after this, I'm going to DM you Asian because I want to learn this stuff. and book a call with you. And by the way, I just want to say, when we first chatted and we first met, when I first got a chance to chat with Gloria, it was just off of a Zoom call. We, had a mutual friend, and immediately right off the bat, I could already feel how genuine and how I think the word that came to mind is transactional, which is this is not about transaction for Gloria and the work that you do. Like, I genuinely feel like you are here to help those around you rise, and that is a huge value that I've always had and as part of this podcast and as part of all that we do is like, when we rise together. So on behalf of everyone who can see that value coming from you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this platform. And it takes one to know one. So I could say the same thing about you as well. And I think what you're doing is absolutely so needed in this world. And when I asked you, like, why take this leap and niche down to Asians, and you're like, I didn't start this way, but I really think that there needs to be more support in the Asian community. And I'm like, hell yeah. So I'm so glad that you did something that maybe business sense doesn't make the most revenue, but you're really fine tuning and serving this community at a much higher level. And so that's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And again, I really appreciate having you on the show. If you're listening on a car or something like that, make sure to save this episode. And again, as always, if something that came up from something Gloria shared, how to build PR, how to, truly take power into your own hands, and not to mention make a bunch more money, and that's something that interests you, don't forget to send it to somebody that you care about. As always, when we rise together. Thanks again.